In a world where climate change is considered to be a threat to human progress, we have here with us today authors, publishers, and imprints who specialize in eco-literature. And this session, the upcoming session, will clear the confusion. Is there a sustainable ecosystem for green books in India? The Business of Green Books. The session is being moderated by Ms. Vidya Mani, one of the India's foremost children's book curators, head of General Fiction and Non-Fiction List at GLF, the founding member of Funky Rainbow, a traveling bookshop and book consultancy, and she runs the Melting Pot, a content and design studio. So without any delay, I would like to invite Ms. Vidya onto the stage. Please do the honors of taking up the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. You want to come up front? It's fine. This is not school, so we're quite good. No. So it's an absolute pleasure to be talking about the business of green books with three dynamic ladies here this afternoon. I have with me Anita Mani, the founder of Indian Pitta, India's first dedicated imprint for bird lovers, conservationists, and policymakers. I have Shivapriya R., who's the publisher of literary fiction and non-fiction at Bloomsbury, India, and Sujata Padmanabhan from the environmental group Kalpavriksh, who manages the publication of their books on nature, environment, and conservation. Yes, thank you. So, of course, a Green Literature Festival is going to focus on green books. I mean, we have two independent bookstores up here, all focusing on green reads at the moment. So my first question to you, ladies, is that the last few years have been pretty good for green books in India. Going by the quality and the quantity of the books that we've been bringing out in the last few years, it does seem like all of us Indians are engaging quite a lot in healthy conversations about the environment, about the problems that we face and possible solutions. As publishers, what has your experience been of bringing out these green books, and do you see these green books as an emerging market segment? Anita, you'd like to go first?
So I think the very fact that Indian Pitta was something that we started last year, I think is testament to that question, because there is clearly interest in books on such a specific genre as on birds, bird watching, and by extension, natural history. And I think there's enough traction and interest that we've seen in the response to our first three books, which came out earlier this year, to make me think that the answer to that is yes. Yeah.
There are mics there. You can pick up a mic and start.
Mine's going to be a little bit of a longer answer, Vidya, because I'm embedded. I'm an editor in a trade publishing house, which is not focused on green literature at all. When you'd written to me, you'd mentioned Peter Frankopan and whether Bloomsbury Global does this. I can't speak for the UK, but I don't think they do. Peter Frankopan has been publishing with Bloomsbury for a long time. His interests have shifted to green topics, perhaps, but I don't think Bloomsbury's interests have necessarily done that. And at Bloomsbury India itself, I think it's editors who get interested in stories who end up commissioning those books, and some of them happen to be green. So this year we published Zai Whittaker's Termite Fry, and then we're going to publish Intertidal, and we're reissuing Ranjit Lal's Crow Chronicles, which had gone out of print for some years. And it's interesting, he mentioned that when he first published it, there was hardly any kind of readership other than the general readership. But now, when we publish it, he's definitely going to write to birding groups, all kinds of mailing lists. So now we have a kind of niche market to whom we can specifically target. So things are changing in that sense. But there is no green list within Bloomsbury India.
One of your books is on our long list, Nitin Shekhar's What's
Yes,
Left of the
yes.
Jungle. And Avni was one submission to, the hunt for the man-eater. Avni was on, Bloomsbury, sent us that book for consideration for the GLF Awards. So there are some green books clearly, but like you say, perhaps editors' personal interests.
Can I take a couple of minutes to, there's another way of looking at this, which is, I think about 8 years ago, around the time Amitav Ghosh was writing and working on The Great Derangement, he was publicly writing about this, but I think he was also writing to individual writers and encouraging them to bear witness to what's happening to the climate, what's happening to the world and the environment. It's a bit complicated. You can't necessarily tell writers what to write. But I think he was saying if you're writers and this generation has to talk about what's happening. So I know this because I was sitting with a writer and she said, I received this email from him and this is what he said. And she was bemused. She didn't know what to make of it. And I think about 6 or 7 years ago, the French Book Office had taken a few publishers from India to the Paris Book Fair. I was at Juggernaut at that point, which was at that point a digital-first publisher. So we were looking for genre fiction to populate the app. And I was meeting these publishers, French publishers, and they had like shelves of climate fiction. I'd never heard of this genre. 7 years ago, I was bemused at that point. But now if you're going to look at any SFF list, half of them are climate fiction, right? And they're not even 100 or thousands of years into the future, or even 50. They're like 5-10 years from now, the apocalypse is here. So in some sense, I think green fictions, it's happened. Some of us may not recognize it in trade publishing, but it's here.
Lovely. What about you, Sujata? Always lovely to hear about children's books.
I think possibly to answer your question, I'll share a little bit about Kalpavriksha's journey in publishing. So Kalpavriksha is an environment NGO. It's over 4 decades, been in existence for over 4 decades. And for a number of years, there were a lot of publications that came out which were an output of the work that was happening, the program or the thematic area that members were working on. And these were for a very niche readership, people who were actually involved in the field, NGOs, to be used for advocacy, training, awareness raising, networking, and things like that. Now, the work that I am co-coordinating within the organization is basically books for children on nature, wildlife, and environment. But the beginnings of that actually happened quite by accident. It was in 2008. I was working in Ladakh on an environment education program, and prior to 2008 actually, where the director was very keen on a storybook for children on wildlife, and I refused because I'd only published one storybook till then, and I thought I was kind of an accidental writer. But there was an incident that happened on the ground, which resulted in a snow leopard being saved by a young lad. And when I heard of that, that really inspired me, and therefore, though it wasn't in the original planned list, we brought out a storybook. It was a collaboration. Well, I think somewhere that gave us the confidence. So in the subsequent years, whenever we were invited by local organizations to develop educational material, we sometimes in the list said, okay, we'll do a storybook. So subsequently, we did two storybooks for Kutch, for children in Kutch. We did one for honey harvesters in Bhima Shankar Wildlife Sanctuary near Maharashtra. But it was actually in 2018 that we actually started publishing for children books which are not related to project work, for a general audience. We took a lot of time before we took that decision. We discussed the idea for almost 6 months within the organization for various reasons. And then we took the plunge. We were nervous. We had never published, like, okay, 2,000 copies of a title. And I remember when the first title came out, all of us saying, what if it doesn't sell? What if it just sits here within our rooms, the office rooms? So just to answer your question, when I think back, it's been about possibly 6-7 years now that we've been doing this. The books are moving out. So I think there is a need. What part, what segment, what part of overall publishing, I'm not the right person because we do only books on green books. Yeah, only on green books. But we've actually been happy with the reception that the books have got. So I think there is a need out there there's a need definitely from schools, from educators, from other NGOs. Government organizations also want to stock up schools, school libraries with green books. So I think there is.
Add to what I think Sivapriya mentioned and what we were speaking about earlier, that some of the books that are coming out are not necessarily green books, but they have a strong element of the green running through them. If you look at what Janice Pariyat's book, Everything the Light Touches, it's as much about the beauty of the Meghalayan landscape and about their way of life within that natural system as it is about all the other themes that she's writing about. I think that consciousness is becoming more pervasive, if not driving the whole theme of the book, as a aside to what I think we said earlier.
There is that little bit of green that we can, or a lot of it that we can see in many, many books. Lovely to hear that, Sujata. I mean, very partially saying that the world of children's books has such a great interest for me, and I'm so happy to see that the children's books are sort of leading the way in a particular way to create this sort of market segment. Anita, I meant to ask you, I mean, you set up, Indian Pitta as an exclusive imprint that sort of, an imprint that is dedicated completely to, bird watching and natural history. What prompted that decision? I mean, that's quite a brave new world that you were stepping into, really, isn't it? Would you like to tell us a bit about what prompted that decision and how it spanned out this far?
For me, it was kind of organic because I've been a bird watcher for many years, and I've been in writing and publishing for an equally long amount of time. So it was really about bringing together two interests, but I think it suddenly looked a lot more viable because there's such a huge upsurge of interest in bird watching, in the natural space. I mean, I'm part of the Delhi Bird Club in Delhi, and a few years ago we launched a bird club for children, and the number of kids that would just show up for those walks, and I think right here in Bangalore, NCF's had a great response to their early bird programs. There is a lot, and as the pandemic sort of pressed the button on that even more, when people thought it's safer to be outdoors than indoors, so it drove a lot of interest in looking outwards. And I think that's why the timing was right for an imprint like this. And the response, I mean, we always look at birds or bird watching. One way of looking at it is all the hobby groups which are driving the interest. But I think there's a larger pervasive interest in something like this. For example, when we launched Ashish Pitti's book, The Living Air, earlier this year, we were looking at ways to engage with readers. So along with Sustain Round Glass, we ran this contest, and all people had to do was write 500 words on any bird of their choice or any bird-related experience. We got some 200 responses from the Northeast, from Mizoram, from Nagaland, from Jammu and Kashmir, from Kutch, from Andaman and Nicobar. And people were writing, I mean, the level of, the ability to communicate varied, the themes varied, but what rang true, and I think for a reader, that's what jumps out at you, is that the sheer passion and beauty that these people were clearly seeing in what they were transmitting. No, sometimes it's not about mounting expeditions into remote areas. It's really about enjoying the birds in your backyard, and that's far more universal than we think it is.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got a clutch of books now that literally focus on birds that you can see outside your window. Sure, you may have to do a Himalayan expedition to see the monal or whatever it is, right? But sometimes a lot of that interest begins right outside your window. So that's just lovely. I particularly like the point that you made about interest groups that have sort of, fueled this, you know that there are people looking to do bird watching, going on bird walks, and, and hence identifying an interest that exists in this space, essentially. So, Shivapriya, I wanted to ask you, environmental writing has really come a long way. I mean, in the 3 years of the Green Literature Festival itself, right, we can now see that, when we first set up the first year, there was a lot of, confusion on whether we're looking at academic books, if we're only going to be focusing on, heavy books of non-fiction that discuss various aspects of the environment. And for us too, it was like such a huge learning, when we were checking out books for the awards, when we were, receiving entries from various publishers, to see that, it had come such a long way from what a lot of us think, was environmental writing. There are wonderful books of fiction now, non-fiction, memoirs, poetry. In fact, the poet Ranjit Hoskote was on our long list, last year, and was one of our winners, right? There are beautiful travelogues that take you, into the nooks and corners of India. And I think, somehow, I mean, I feel, and I'm sure, the morning's panel, Mr. Mahesh Rangarajan was saying, right? The fluid beauty of a lot of this writing, I think, makes the environment or nature come alive a lot more than maybe PDFs and pie charts and graphs. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not a PDFs and pie charts and graphs person at all. Now, what do you think publishers like Bloomsbury, are publishers like Bloomsbury doing something to encourage this trend?
Again, I think it's going to be a little sideways and roundabout, Vidya. The thing is, for instance, I don't know if Yuvan's here, but it'll be a bit of a shock to him. So, both Termite Rizai's book and Intertidal, my sales and marketing colleagues actually said no. In fact, I'd already written to Yuvan, we'd put together a proposal, then I circulated, which is how it gets okayed, right? So, so I think in publishing and editorial within publishing houses, there's definitely this. We know that there's something happening and we should be publishing here. That's one of the things that the editor-in-chief of Bloomsbury, Krishnan Chopra, said, that, we need to build books. We need to publish in this area. Maybe not even build a list. That's too ambitious, but we want to do that. And so, it was much coaxing, negotiation, and finally arm twisting to say that we're going to publish these books. And we have. And, the response has been phenomenal for Intertidal, the kind of interest. Right now, I'm looking at a proposal which is on the lives of insects, Indian insects. Now, I'm getting the same response. Is this a trade book? How is this? We don't know if this is going to sell. So there is, I think, interest within the editorial part of a publishing house, in the writing, in the subject, all of that. But I'm not sure if every part of the publishing house is moved with the editors themselves.
Right. I wonder if Yuvan's here and knows that his book almost didn't make it. But look at that. Look at the response. Intertidal. Yuvan, are you here? Okay. All right.
So in fact, with Lives of Insects, I'm like, this is exactly what you said about Intertidal. It hasn't moved them.
What did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
This is exactly your response to Intertidal. So, but we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to be an easy fight. So that's how it is.
But we're glad you're fighting that fight for sure, right? And we're all eagerly waiting for Intertidal to come out, of course. Sujata, for you, it's, with children, I mean, we know a lot of young people are voicing concerns about climate change, about pollution, about the way the world is changing around us, at the moment, alarmingly. I mean, so many ecological disasters that they see happening right in front of them, change of climate, floods. So the books that you bring out, and you made such a good point earlier about the initial clutch of books at Kalpavriksha being project-led, but now, you're doing more generic books. I mean, do you think these books are, helping to sort of encourage real-world exploration, for young people, and maybe spurring them on to some action?
Firstly, I believe that it's making a change, because I don't think otherwise we would be putting in so much time and effort into this. But what I honestly believe is that books, like all books, not just our green books, books kind of sow a seed of thought. And I think that's an important first step before any action or any exploration or action takes place. But what I'd like to believe that our books do, so I'm not saying they do, is to, besides seeding thought, I'd like to believe that somewhere maybe a small fire in the belly is lit, just so that, through the books, maybe children are getting to know that there are these issues, they're burning issues, there's injustice very often in many environmental situations. So somewhere, just that uneasy feeling in the stomach, which will then make you want to act. I think since we publish books largely for primary school children, though we do go up to 14 years, the manuscripts we've done till now is for up to 12 years. I think it's easier for children to act on issues that they easily relate to. So extinction and things like that sometimes is, you could read about it, you learn about it, but as a child you wouldn't quite know what to do. So if I think back of the books that we've published, we did one on food called Something to Chew On. And I do know that one school, after reading the book, kids got together and made a patch and they decided to grow ragi. And there was also a mother who got back to us saying that her child was insisting on eating unpolished rice. Yeah. And she was all of 6 years old after the mother read out portions to her. And the mother was like frantic because she called me and said, I live in Hawaii now and there's no shop that sells unpolished rice. It's all polished. So we have examples like this. Even the Miracle series by Nandita,
that's right,
Sundar Bagh, where communities in Bombay actually have got together and made like a difference. One is to looking at a dump yard and then making it into a lovely garden. And the other is cleaning up a beach based on Versova. Those examples, I've been at sessions where these stories have been told, and I think their children feel a sense of agency when they hear that communities and people, not researchers, not scientists, like just community people getting together and making a difference. I think that kind of gives, I can only judge by the verbal reactions, right? It's very difficult for a publisher to get to know. You just know from what you hear. So with these two books, there are definitely children's verbal reactions is one of hope. They keep talking about what they would do, or they are already doing, or what they are going to do at home, in school, in their community.
I can imagine. I think there's going to be many parents queuing up for the book on unpolished rice post the session. But since this is on the business of green books, I think we have very little time, but I'm going to sort of run through the question with all three of you. Given that, in terms of book sales, is environmental literature still considered a niche segment? And what do each one of you do? Are there special strategies that you employ to, promote these books?
I think for our books, I think we feed into an existing interest. There's a hobby, the many hobby groups. And some of them are so super specialized. Like in Delhi, where I live, we have bird watching groups for each part of the city. Then there are groups that are specialized in bird photography. there are groups that specialize only in water birds. I mean, it is insane. I mean, the amount of specialized. So that, and I think that also demonstrates the depth of interest. So I think books that sort of help people, understand what they see in the field, and also maybe it also feeds in both ways, right? What you read impacts what you do in the field, and what you see in the field feeds into what you read. I mean, it's really lovely when that happens. I mean, I think and I think people are enjoying that. I think we just brought out a book on the birds of the Delhi area by Sudhir Vyas. I mean, Mr. Vyas is I think he's a retired diplomat, and it's an authority on the birds of the Delhi area. It's a wonderful story of the ecological context of the 472 species that live in the Delhi area. And that's immediately important for anybody who birds in the Delhi area, who are trying to understand as to what these birds are doing here, to answer that very specific question. So feeding into an interest group really helps. And I think the other thing, and what I have learned, and it's something that we have learned rather than strategized about it and gone after it in any way, is that for our last book, which is Women in the Wild, I think it lies at the confluence of several interest lines. I mean, well, it's about, about women wildlife biologists. So within wildlife biology, you're looking at the work done by women. But it's also been, I think, very interesting for people who are interested in feminist literature, who are interested in gender issues, others who like inspirational stories. So I think if you place a book at the nexus of interest lines, I think you broad base your audience and build that business case for these books, so to speak. Yeah.
What about you, Shivapriya?
So one of the things that's noticeable about green books is if they're well written, they really tend to be, in a sense, high-profile books. They're widely reviewed. The writers are interviewed. They sell. I'm not sure if they sell in huge numbers. They haven't so far, not what we've done, but they've sold decently, and that's pretty good by book selling, publishing standards in India of English books. But you also get all other kinds of benefits in that sense. It's, you do get a fair amount of publicity for these books. And it must be working because I think we spoke about this earlier. Pradeep Krishan published books of, Trees of Delhi. And then there have just been books from everywhere about he wrote Trees of Central India, but there have been more. There's been, Harini Nagendra Seema's book and much more, many more. So it's growing. This won't happen unless there's both interest and the business itself works, And there's some kind of momentum, it feels like to me.
Get a sense of that, Sujata?
So I'd just like to take a slightly different angle to the question, which is, one is, of course, to promote our books. We do what, I don't want to go through, we do the regular stuff. We also, I know there's a Dragonfly Festival, and Yuvan, I don't know whether he's run away, but we've published a book on Sahi's Quest, which is on a dragonfly, and WWF is organizing it. So events like that, anything that can get our books across. But just for us, what is also interesting, or what we want to do, is to get these stories out to more kids. And so one of the things that we've been doing, putting a lot of effort into, is to actually contacting publishers in regional languages and asking them if they're interested in translating them. And to make it work, actually, we've just taken this it's an unwritten policy, but we will go with what works for the regional publisher. So we don't have certain, whatever. We will give you the rights only if you do X, Y, Z. We're absolutely open. So I'm actually really happy to say that in the span of 6 years or 7 years, we've got 35 translations out in 7 languages.
Oh, That's fantastic.
So our focus is that, not more than promoting our books, which of course we do. We also want these stories out. The other, I'll just take one more minute. The other thing which I think has helped is we publish under Creative Commons license. Kalpavriksha has never had a copyright to its books. Now, of course, there's CC, so we choose our derivatives of the license. But I think somewhere that also helps to get stories out. I do know that one of our stories is going to be used in one of the Oxford University Press textbooks for grade 8, grade 7 or 8. So that's the other way. I think just seeing CC makes a publisher a little more approachable. I'm saying this from KV's experience, but my own personal experience also as an author of a non-KV book, that having somewhere a CC license, I think, helps dissemination of the story. And since we're talking about green books and green stories and messages getting out, I think it's important to see how in different ways we can spread this out.
That's lovely. Was that bamboo that you're referring to? As an author?
Chuskit.
I see. Chuskit goes to school. Okay. All right. Of course, so we've completely run out of time. One last thing, but if you could just sort of say it in one line. Lots of aspiring writers always at Green Literature Festival, and you all are publishers. What are you looking for? And I'm secretly hoping one of you will say romance.
You took the words. I mean, like, but we are interested in all books related to birds and bird watching and I think that we don't have enough, we have a lot of field guides, but what we want to do is to bring out books that are beautiful to read, in terms of that books talk about the ecology of landscapes, about species, about biodiversity, about their experiences in the field. Those are the books that we want to bring out. And to address your question, and yes, I'm waiting for someone to write a birding romance so that I can publish it.
You heard it first at Green Literature Festival, people. Birding romances, anyone? Budding romantic writers? What about you, Shivpriya? We're just out of time, so I want the two of you to tell us very quickly.
Really a good story. It can be about anything.
Well said. What about you, Sujata?
Our preference is, of course, for stories that give hope. I think it's really important for children to have stories of hope in these days. And stories that maybe are a little nuanced with where the issues are concerned, not simplistic. Because I think, like Aparajita was talking about the situation in Arunachal, and that's actually true across the country, that environmental issues are not simplistic. So it's challenging when you're writing for children, but no simplistic messages. At least some nuances for a child.
Absolutely. So well said. On that hopeful note, people take note. There are people waiting for manuscripts, publishers waiting for manuscripts, and I hope you'll send them all in so we can see a lot more green literature in the coming years. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for this enlightening session through their experiences regarding the future of green books, a perspective through the lens of publishers. And now let me request our moderator, Ms. Anita Mani, to felicitate our panelists as a token of appreciation and gratitude from the Green Literature family. Can we have a huge round of applause for our panelists, please? And I'm so sure by now our audience might have had an idea of what the publishers are looking forward to in this field.